Talk. Cool. Hi. Hello. Welcome, everyone. This is the last talk of Crash Course. I know it's been a long weekend, but thank you for showing up. We really appreciate it. Okay, cool. So this talk is about APIs and Postman. It's really, really chill. It's also more of a follow along kind of talk and less of a lab kind of talk. So if you would like to follow along, that will be the most useful. So we'll be talking a bunch about APIs and a bunch about this API testing thing called Postman. So out of curiosity, how many of you have used Postman before? If you have, you can either speak up or raise your hand from the participants panel. Uh, Whatever works for you. If you haven't, you can press no on the participants panel, and that will give me a sense of how to cater this talk. Cool. Okay. So lots of new people to Postman. Oh yeah, that's wonderful. Even more of a learning experience. Sweet. Okay. Cool. So yeah, Postman is like one of my favorite tools in the world. Actually, it's one of the first things I set up when I'm doing a hackathon because it is really, really useful for testing any backend things you're developing, or if you're developing any APIs, which happens more frequently, which happens pretty frequently for me at least. Let me quickly hide my bookmarks bar so you can see more of the presentation and less of the fluff. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So, right. We'll get started. The first thing we'll do is we'll set up everything. We'll download Postman and we'll try and understand what RESTful APIs are and talk about the changing face of software. So, um, you can get the Postman client for free on a bunch of platforms on getpostman.com/apps. So let me quickly put that link in the chat as well. Uh, getpostman.com/apps. Uh, and yeah, hopefully that allows you to download Postman. It should work on pretty much every platform. Um, pretty much every operating system. And while you do that on the side, we'll talk about some of or what APIs are, what Postman is, and all of the good stuff. And as I said, the changing face of software. So you can also open this link on the side, and it will be pretty useful. I'll have it open as well for copying all the code snippets that we'll be using. So yeah, keep that open. That'll be pretty helpful as well. Let me something in the chat. Okay, yeah, thanks, Anushka. Cool. Yeah, so with that said, let's move on to the next slide. So, ooh, wow, these animations are not working as I wanted them to. Okay, so the question you might be asking is, what is Postman? I'll give a brief answer for now, and then we'll show what Postman actually does. But uh, Postman is an application or a platform that is helpful for developers to develop APIs. Um, how exactly it does that, we'll get into that. But a question we should answer first is, what exactly is an API? So during this talk, at least, we'll only be talking about web APIs, so APIs that you access via the internet. And what that means is, imagine you are trying to do something on the internet, right? You are the client who wants to get some data from the internet. What you do to get this data from the internet is you send a request to a server, and the server will actually end up giving you a response. And you do this on a day-to-day basis. For example, when you open google.com, you're basically telling the Google servers to send you the homepage HTML CSS of google.com. When you are searching for something on Google, you're telling google.com, okay, this is what I'm searching for, send me the search result. When you're checking your email, you're asking, what new email did I get? When you're buffering a YouTube video, you're like, oh, send me the next frames of the video, all of that stuff. The request can also go the other way. For example, you sometimes might want to send things to a server. For example, when you submit a form, you're telling the server that, okay, this is my information, save it in yourself, save it in your database. So request is basically whenever you tell the server to do something or get some data for you, or you're sending some data to the server. And an API is basically the framework that controls how users are able to access these endpoints to the server. The endpoints are basically the various activities the server can do for you. Awesome. So, any questions about what an API is? All right. Okay. And then there's this catch-all clickbaity term called a RESTful API. A RESTful API uh, is one that is an API that uses HTTP requests to contact the server. Now, what that means is basically whenever you want to send something to the server or get data back from the server, you're not doing anything complicated. All you're doing is you're going to a URL. We'll see exactly what that means, but you'll be seeing a lot of URLs today. So something that starts with an HTTPS slash google.com slash something slash something else. So cool. So now we know what an API is. We know what RESTful APIs are, and we know Postman is going to help us develop APIs. Cool. So now I wanted to quickly talk about something called the changing face of software. Uh, and by that, what I mean is that in earlier days, and even now, typically, when a software developer is trying to develop an API, what they're basically doing, or when they're trying to design a server, right? What they basically did or still do is they think of the problem they're trying to solve, and then they start writing the code for it. And hopefully things work, and then other people are hopefully able to use it. But that is not ideal. Like that's why the perspective and best practices for programmers is changing now to be API first. And what that means is that whenever a developer is trying to develop an API, they focus more of their time earlier on in defining and designing the API before actually going into the implementation details and writing the code for it. And this is why something like Postman is becoming extremely common, is because before all these developers go into their VS codes and Vims, they first go into Postman to actually figure out what the API would look like, write the test cases, and then actually do the code work to get the API working. And that is why Postman is becoming increasingly common for in industry. Lots of companies are using it as part of their workflows to follow these better development practices. Okay, and specifically, Postman helps with a lot of things. It takes you all the way from an API, all the way around an API development lifecycle. So you start with the designing and mocking, which involves figuring out what endpoints are there, what arguments they take, all of that stuff. And then once you have it implemented, testing the API, seeing that they give the right response, they're sufficiently responsive, and then even automating this testing process. And then you can document this API so other people can use it, and then continuously monitor it so that you make sure that your API never crashes, and then even publishing your API and all of its documentation to the larger community. So awesome. Hopefully that gives clarity on people about what Postman is. Uh, and after we figure out what an API and specifically what a RESTful API is. Any questions? Cool. So hopefully in this time, people had time to get Postman installed. If people need a few more minutes, I am more than happy to wait. So just let me know in the chat what people are feeling. Do people need more time? Okay, so people have it installed. Awesome. Okay, so one thing I forgot to do that I'll quickly do is actually demonstrate a RESTful API quickly to you. So it turns out that google.com and pretty much any website actually uses the concept of a RESTful API. So if you go to the code snippets, you'll actually find on the very top, the first code snippet. What this is doing, let me put it in my terminal real quick. Yep. Yeah, what this is doing is it's saying, uh, oops, yeah, so curl basically is a terminal command which allows you to get a URL. So that's what we are saying, using curl to get google.com. And google.com serves a RESTful API. So let me first quickly just run this command to show you what this does. It gives me a bunch of, as you can see, HTML text. So when I get Google, it's basically giving me the source code of google.com. And what I can do is I can put it in a file, HTML, get google.html. And if I open this file, it will actually show me the web page, google.html. So, and this is like not exactly what is happening on google.com because of some other things that go on within browsers. But basically, when I go to google.com normally on Google Chrome, this is doing the exact same process as when I did it using curl. So hopefully that gives you some similarity between what's going on at the browser level and what's going on at the API level. Okay, with that out of the way, let's move on to some of the Postman concepts. Okay, so the goal of this chapter of the talk is to understand the elements of the Postman UI and just the hierarchy of concepts within Postman. So within Postman, if you open Postman, you'll see a bunch of things going on. You'll see the header. This is where you can switch your workspaces, switch your accounts, and this is where you create new requests. So you'll be accessing some of the common shortcuts here a lot. Then we have the sidebar. This is where you see all of your collections, all of your requests organized. You can also see the history of requests. That are there. So you can see which requests you called previously and what responses did you get. So that is pretty helpful. And then there's the request builder. This is where the magic happens. This is where you specify the request you're building, what parameters you're passing in, what authentication you're doing. And I apologize if all of these are sounding like buzzwords that you've never heard before, but I promise it will become much more clear as we go on. But for now, you need to remember that all you need to remember is this thing in the middle, that is the request builder. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see the response viewer. This is where you see the response of the server. So you will see the source code of Google, for example, or you will, or if you're actually sending something to the server, you usually get an error, you get a response code, which is basically like, oh, either a success message or a failure message. So this will be very useful as well. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, cool. Yeah, so request and Postman. Now, the cornerstone of Postman is its ability to send API requests, and it supports all HTTP request methods. There are a bunch of them. Get, as I said, was for getting data from the server. Post and put is for sending data to the server. There's a bunch more. There's like delete for deleting things on the server, and a whole lot more. Now you might be thinking, which one do I use? Now it depends on which perspective you're talking about. If you're a developer, then you need to follow the best practices for designing APIs to figure out what is a get request, what is going to be a post request, and that is based on the kind of things your endpoint would be doing. If your endpoint is just sending data back to the user, that means it's a get request. But if your endpoint is actually changing things on the server side, then it's a post request. Or if it's deleting things from a database, then it's a delete request. But for today, we won't worry too much about that. What you might be worried about as a user of an API, how do I know if it's a get request or a post request? And good thing is that in all well-documented APIs, this is given to you. You are told that, okay, this is the endpoint that you have to hit, and this is the request method that you have to use to do it, and these are the parameters that you'll have to pass in. We'll do an example of this, so it'll become very clear very soon. And Postman is very flexible with the kinds of methods it supports. It's also very flexible with the kinds of responses it supports, whether it's JSON, XML, HTML, or a text response, all of the good stuff. So it doesn't leave anything out. And within Postman, you can combine a bunch of requests together into something called a collection. And all of them have a bunch of other things. We won't go into too much into that today. And Postman also supports variables. So if you quickly want to change something, you're able to do that using variables. If you want to use the same variable name across multiple requests, you can do that, which is incredibly useful. This is something we'll actually touch into as well. One common example of this is if you want to use an API key, for example. This is basically a password that allows you to access an API. You can do that. And you can save that in an API key variable so you can use it across multiple requests. And so you don't have to type in the 20-digit long password every single time you make a request. Awesome. Any questions so far? Cool. Okay, with that, we can actually just jump right into Postman. So uh, let me open Postman real quick. Uh, okay, so uh, why doesn't everyone try and actually send a get? So if you make a new request, you should be able to send a new request to http google.com. Make sure it's a get request, and you don't need to worry about any parameters. And what we'll do is we'll just send the request, and we will wait for a response. And well, let's see. This is the response we get, and this is still an HTML source code for google.com. So can people let me know if they're able to do this step? Just figuring out how to send a basic request on Postman. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. We can work through this together. Awesome. Okay, so people are able to do it. Got it. Anyone needs more time? Cool. Okay. So in fact, one thing you might have noticed is that this response is actually no different from the response we got when we called Google from our terminal. And this is also not very different from the response your web browser gets when it actually goes to google.com. So all of that is very similar to what you would normally expect. Uh, okay, so now let's up the stakes a little bit. We'll go into this something called the Open Weather API. And in the Open Weather API, it is basically a bunch of uh, API endpoints for accessing, for getting weather information. So let's see. The API I want to use is get current weather information. So yeah, this seems like a good API call. I have to pass in the city name as well as the API key. Now you might not have the API key for Open Weather API. You need to make an account for that. But I have my own, and if you go to the code snippets, you can actually copy my API key. Just don't misuse it, but you can definitely use it for this lab. So I copied it in, and when I try and send this request, it will not work because we've just copied in a bunch of random things. It has like parentheses and stuff. So like this is not a valid URL. So we'll try and fix that. So we can replace the city name with anything. What I'll do is I'll replace this with a variable called city name. So in Postman, variable names can have spaces within them. That's totally okay. And I'll replace this with the variable API key. So let me know if you're able to do that. And as you can see, within the request builder, the query now has the values, city name, and the API key. So once you've done that, we've like created new variables, city name and API key. Now we actually need to assign values to these variables. So do that, you need to assign these variables to their values within the Postman environment. And you access the Postman environment by clicking on the eye on the top right. So I'll click on the eye on the top right. Um, this is my API key. I'll just put it in the chat so you can also just use the same one and see it work for yourself. So within this, I'm going to create a new variable let's call it city name. Uh, don't care about the initial value, but the current value we want is Pittsburgh. So now we'll get weather information for Pittsburgh. And similarly, you'll have to create a new variable API key and give its current value, the value that I just gave you, which is my API key. So once you're done, you can save this and we should be good to make our request. So I'm gonna do that. Hopefully it works. Yep, we actually get the weather information for Pittsburgh. Uh, and you can see it's predicting rain. So it's, yeah, so, sounds about on point. And now the good thing about using variables is that if I quickly want to change the city, I can change it to, say, New York. And I am going to send the request again, and it will send me the weather information for New York. So pretty flexible in that way. Yeah, so I'll give you a few minutes to try this for yourself. Let me know if you're done, and let me know if you run into any troubles with doing this on Postman. Once again, the environment window, you can do that by clicking on the eye on the top right. Got San Francisco weather. Yes, lovely. Actually, good thing you typed in San Francisco because note that San Francisco is a two-word city name, right? So it has a space within it. And URLs cannot have space within it. So what Postman is doing under the covers is converting that space into a special character so it can be transmitted over the internet. So that's pretty cool and something we don't have to worry about. Now, one thing I will emphasize is that Postman's not doing anything too cool. Uh, like if I click on the request builder, these three dots, I can actually look at the code and get the code for uh, this exact request in pretty much any programming language. And you can like build the request in Postman and then copy it over to your Python code base or your JavaScript front end. And you don't have to do anything about very too much about building the request. So which is pretty cool. You can also get the corresponding curl command for for this request. So I'll actually just do this and copy it over to my terminal just to show you that this is actually doing nothing fancy. If I just type it in here, I get the response as it is. The only downside is that my terminal is not pretty printing it with like the correct indentation and stuff, while Postman is. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so if people are warmed up, we can move on to the next chapter and pretty much the final interactive chapter called Advanced Requests in Postman. So, um, yeah, let me know if anyone wants more time. Otherwise, we're good to start. Okay, so we'll be using, instead of making one or two requests, we'll actually be making a bunch of requests in this one. So I will actually encourage you to create a new collection within Postman and call it uh, a RESTful Booker, for example, because that's the name of the app or server we'll be accessing using Postman. And then you'll be able to save all of your API requests within this collection. So um, yeah, you can create a new collection by going to the top left. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to use RESTful Booker, but what is RESTful Booker? So to get a sense of that, I'm quickly going to paste in the link for the RESTful Booker documentation. It's an API, and it's actually just it's an API designed to learn APIs. So, which is why we'll be using that. It has some really good endpoints and a lot of good educational value. So you can see a bunch of information within that, but let's play it easy and let's just get so or to give more kind of context in what this does is that it is an API for managing reservations or bookings for, say, a hotel, right? So it actually has an endpoint called get all bookings, and as always, you can find all of these things on under the milestone 2 for this lab. So I'm going to send this link again if somebody missed that. It'll actually be easiest for you to just copy all the links from this as we move through the lab. Okay, so yeah, the goal here is to get all the bookings, see all the bookings, or at least all the booking IDs that have been made within at our hotel, right? So I've already created this request. You can find the URL, copy it here. Make sure it's a GET request because we're getting information from the internet. And there's nothing fancy we need to do. All I need to do is press send, and I get a bunch of booking IDs. So these are all the bookings that have been made at our hotel. And notice that these are just the booking IDs, so they don't tell us who has been registered or what is the name of the guest, because we want to protect the privacy of the people staying at our hotel. Now, yeah, that was nice and easy. Now, suppose we want to take it up a notch, right? We really like this hotel. We actually want to get a booking at this hotel. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a booking. So notice if you go on the documentation here, right? So to get all bookings, the request was you send a GET request to this URL, restfulbooker/booking. Now, to create a booking, it's still the same URL, but we're changing the request method. So we are still accessing the same URL, but this time we are telling the server that instead of sending us data, we'll send you data and you make a booking reservation for us. So basically, the point is that one URL can have multiple access points, which might do different things. And all of that is made clear within the API documentation here. Okay, so I'm also going to copy this thing because it'll be helpful. But yeah, now we want to make a request at this hotel. I have this URL copied. I'm going to send uh, send my request, and it says an internal service error. So, and the reason for that is we've actually not told the server what kind of who we are, what our name is, when do we want to do the reservation for. So to do that, we want to send some text within the body of our request, which is who we are, what our first and last name is, have we paid our deposit, what is the price we paid, and how when we'll check in and when we'll check out. So you can find this JSON exactly how it is within on the website. And once you have that, even you might as well want to change it to your name. And once you have that, you can actually send a request, and it tells me that okay, I've created booking ID 17 with my name and details. So if I go to get all bookings here, you might notice that booking ID number 17 did not exist before, and now when I do it, booking ID 17, uh, let's see, maybe it didn't update. Is 17 here? Oh yeah, wonderful. Yeah, 17 is here. So 17 didn't exist before, but now it has my reservation. So it has created my booking ID. So as you work through this, it will also add your booking ID on this in this list. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to actually create a booking and then make sure that your booking actually shows up in the get all booking side. And obviously, as always, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself, and that will be, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Cool. So does anyone need more time? Otherwise, we can move on to the delete a booking phase. Awesome. Okay, so now we have created a booking at our at the hotel. We just saw we have booking ID number 17. It's under my name, but we realized that I no longer want this. This is COVID's going on. I don't want to stay at a random hotel, so I want to delete my booking. So I'll go here. Let's say we want to delete my booking ID. So you copy the URL and you change the booking ID to your booking ID. So now we want to delete this. Now, make sure that you switch it to a delete request because that is this time we want to delete something from the server. Um, and what I'll end up doing is I'll just click delete and I expect this to fail. Yep. So it's telling me forbidden. And the reason for that is nobody should be able to arbitrarily cancel anyone's booking, right? Like right now, I just put in 17, but if it was like 20, 25, whatever, I can cancel anyone's booking at this hotel. Like that is not good. So what I instead want to do is I want to add some kind of authorization. I want to add some kind of password protection to my API. So for that, RESTful Booker actually has an authorization endpoint. So you go to you make a post request to this authorization endpoint to get a token that allows you to either to allows you to delete any request. So this is like admin privileges to the server. So in order to get your authorization token, we nobody can arbitrarily request it. They also need an ID and password. So to do that, you create a new request. You can call it authorization. You have to make a post request to this server and to this URL. Sorry, as always, the URL is right on the credentials page, and we need to put in the password. Now, the password, username password here is not the most secure thing in the world. It's just admin and password 123. And with this request, I will be able to request a credential. Cool. So now I have my token. Now let's see what would have happened if I put in the wrong password, right? Hopefully the server is secure enough to say that, oh, I gave in bad credentials. So that's not really what we want. We want to put in the correct password. So we'll do that. And now we have a token that we can use to actually make admin level changes to the server. I'm going to copy this token. This is going to be really important to me. And I'm going to put it in another environment variable. So I'll go to the environment variable page, and I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to add a new thing. I already have it. You have to call it token. You can set the initial value to none and set the current value to the token that you just got. So yeah, so I'll let you get an authorization token for yourself right now. Okay, so with this authorization token, we want to now actually use this with our request. Like now we have the authorization token, but we haven't used it in the request. So I call it again. It oh, uh, if I call it again, it should. Oh yeah. Uh, yeah, so if you call it again, it right now created it for me, but what you will have to do is you'll have to go to the headers section. So change from parameters to headers. And in that, you will actually have to add this section. So let me make sure, try and increase the size of this. Yes, wonderful. I do not want to see the description. Yep, cool. So basically add a key in your header called a cookie, and the value is token equals the authorization token that you just got. So you can actually put in the hard-coded value here, but it will actually be better if you use it as a variable, so you can use it across multiple requests. Cool. So once you have this set up, you should be able to go here and send a request, and Okay, what happened here? Did you have the wrong URL? Okay, yeah. So I was trying to delete a request that had already delete a booking that had already been deleted, so it wasn't doing anything. But if you try and delete your booking, that should hopefully work out. So let's try now that we have admin control. Now let's try and delete, say, booking ID 10. So I'm going to go here, and unless someone else deletes booking ID 10 before me, it should work. So it says created, and that is because the HTTP error code, HTTP response code is 201 created. But what it's actually doing is it's actually deleting the request. So now if I get all bookings again, it will ideally not have booking ID 10. Yep, 10 is gone from the list. So I'll give people a couple of minutes to go around and play more with this. Okay, awesome. So hopefully this worked for you. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat. But okay, so now we have understood what an API is, understood what Postman is, understood how to make simple and advanced requests in Postman. But that's not everything that Postman does. There's a few uh, that we already talked about get versus post requests, so that is good. Uh, but yeah, so then there's some additional features that Postman has, and we won't go into the absolute details of every single one of them, but I just wanted to show some of them to you. So um, I talked a bit about how Postman is really helpful for testing, right? So one thing you can do is if you go in Postman, you can actually test that your API is working quickly. So uh, let's see, let's test our get all bookings API. Suppose you're the developer, you want to make sure that it's actually working correctly. So yeah, if you want to write tests for this. So if you click on parameters, you can actually go to the test page, and here you can write your test as if you're writing tests in JavaScript. So I added a couple of options, but this is you can just copy paste these. So now when I send the request, it works as expected. Now we want to find uh, whether our whether our test results ran correctly. So for that, you need to go to the change from the body to the test results page, and it says that the status code is 200, which is what we expected. You can also see that here, so that is good. But it says that the response time was not below 200 milliseconds. So we said that our API should be very responsive. It should send our results within 200 milliseconds. And when we did 200 milliseconds, it did not work, at least on this one try. Well, this time we did it again. It took 67 milliseconds. So that was a success. But in that one instance, our API failed. So like tests can actually help you do a lot of debugging. This time it took 40 milliseconds, but you can like see that if I make it like the response, if you look at the test, it's saying the Postman response time should be below 1 millisecond. This will hopefully fail. Yep, it failed. It took 57 milliseconds, and it took 1 second, 1 millisecond to get the response. So you can use all of these things to actually uh, build up your test suite for your API to make sure that they're returning the right status code as a response, they have the right responsiveness, they're returning the right data. and you could actually build entire workflows out of it. A Postman has something called a runner that allows you to run requests one after the other and have dependent test cases. It's pretty cool. Uh, we won't go into too much detail into that because that's a whole advanced lecture about Postman. But hopefully, this gave you a good overview of what Postman is, what it can do, how it works. A lot of companies are using it these days as part of their actual API development processes and product development processes because it is so helpful in just designing all these APIs, making sure they're working well, documenting them, and actually publishing them onto the web so that people are also able to use it as it is intended. So uh, I will uh, I will stop there. That is basically everything I had. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll be more than happy to stick around. But yeah, that was it for the Postman talk. That was it for Crash Course. Thank you everyone for coming. This was super fun. Of course, this this could not have happened without you. So yeah, thank you all.